going to thank you once again for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. This was not something that was expected. And I want to also thank you for the very, very kind words of encouragement you gave me last week. They were necessary, I promise. I want to recap, if I may, for just a minute, what we talked about last week for anybody who might have missed that first talk. And the really condensed version is that I came home almost 2 years ago after serving 22 years in the Department of Corrections, with a decent chunk of that time spent in isolation. Specifically, I spent 3,651 consecutive days in isolation, which, if you do the math real quick, is 10 years plus 1 day. That is exactly what the warden told me I was going to do, and he was a man of his word. I also want to say that it was during the execution of Paul Hill, while I was meditating in my cell. I was immediately above the death chamber, and it was while he was being put to death that certain things started to get put into perspective for me. And as you can imagine, that's going to happen in those kind of situations. And what it all boiled down to was, it comes down to personal responsibility. That's what changed my life. Personal responsibility. Accepting not your flaws, not my mother's flaws, not the judge's flaws, my flaws. I put me in prison, nobody else did. Nobody in this room is responsible for that. But I say that the same thing is true for all of you. Your life situations are the results of the decisions you've made along the way. Every single person in this room. Which in itself is actually a fascinating thought. Because every single person in this room is here tonight, not by accident. All the choices you started making when you were a child, all the way through your adulthood, brought you to this room tonight. Personally, I think that's a really exciting concept. But something I would need to talk to about tonight is the courage to make that change. But when I say courage in changing your lives, you have to have a clear idea of where you're at in life. And that's a very difficult thing to do from your own perspective. And I want to give you a demonstration, a short story of what happened to me to get me to understand that I was not viewing my life accurately. You heard me say last week that I served 20 years of those 22 because of an escape. I'd like to tell you about that escape. Now, I have some of my employees here tonight, and for the last 2 years, they've been begging me at work to tell the story of the escape. I don't actually enjoy telling it. It would be like you describing to me maybe a traffic accident you were in. It happened, you dealt with it, you moved on. To me, it's not exciting. I will tell you that it bores me to death. I had to live with the consequences of that escape, so it just is not that interesting to me. But it's, I think, a good demonstration of where my thinking went wrong, and I think I'm not alone in making that mistake. Here's what happened. Toward the end of my prison sentence, when I thought I was going to be going home, on another case, which I'll talk about next week, right when I thought I was going home, the state of Florida surprised me with charges. Charges about something I never would have imagined I could have possibly been charged with. And I didn't do it. Now, the folks that work with me will tell you, when I make a mistake at work, I will tell you I did it. I have looked the owner of my company in the eye and said, yes, I made that mistake. I'll fix it. But if I didn't do something, I'm going to tell you I didn't do it. And what I was accused of, I did not do. Here's the problem. When I got arrested and was facing a life sentence on these new charges, I knew that my case was going to go in front of a jury. And I mistakenly believed that the jury was going to be a bunch of closed-minded, no offense to the people here, but a bunch of closed-minded old folks that didn't want to hear it. I know that we have a tendency to believe that when someone gets arrested, they're automatically guilty. I understand that. Quite frankly, I fall in the same trap. I did not trust our system. I did not trust the jury. I didn't trust my neighbors, because the people who are here tonight are the types of people who would sit on my jury. I did not trust you folks. That's my fault. And I believed that the jury was not going to hear my side, they were going to find me guilty, and I was going to serve a life sentence. Now, I did the calculations. The camp I'm at right now is a max security camp, but it had flaws in the security. And I intended to exploit those flaws. I believed that when the jury found me guilty, I was going to be transferred to a much higher security facility where I'd have a lesser chance of escaping. So I felt that I had a deadline to make this thing happen. So I made a phone call. I called my best friend from high school and I said, hey, I need a little favor. I need a helicopter. Will you steal one for me? He did. I asked for another favor. Would you smuggle a gun to me inside of a maximum security prison? And he did. So here's what happened. One day, well, it wasn't just one day, a particular day, I woke up in the morning, shaved like I normally did, brushed my teeth like I normally did, got dressed like I normally did, went to the recreation yard like I normally did, and I waited, and I watched the time. And I watched the minutes tick toward 1 p.m. Now, anyone who's ever been involved with law enforcement or prisons will tell you that they train for escapes to happen at dawn and at dusk. That's when 90-something% of all escapes occurred. For that reason, I chose to do it at 1 p.m. broad daylight. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right in front of you. I'm going to dare you to stop me. Because at the time, I thought I was the smartest man in the room. Thought I was the smartest man in the room. And I challenged the Department of Corrections to stop me. Well, at 1 p.m., as I was standing inside of an internal fence, beside an internal fence, I was wearing a coat, and this was in June. Kind of odd in Florida to be wearing a coat in June. So a gentleman by the name of Captain Bariner saw me. He knew me, so he walked over to me to ask me, is everything all right? Are you feeling all right? And I turned and looked at Captain Bariner and I said, sir, I think you need to step away from me. Well, what are you talking about, Mr. Whitsett? What's the problem? And I told him, on your life, step away from me. And he kind of looked at me cockeyed, and that's when I pulled my coat back and showed him that I, as a prisoner, was carrying an H&K USP 9mm automatic. I'm not the one to play with. So he held up his hands and he backed up from me. Smartest thing he could do, I guess, under the circumstances. Just a few seconds later, everyone could start hearing the whop, 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 whop of the chopper coming. And it came in low and fast over the tree line. Flew over the double fences, landed on the rec yard in a space that was actually encased within another interior fence where inmates were not allowed to go. So I then climbed that interior fence, picked my way through the barbed wire, just like Uncle Sam taught me to, landed on the other side, and very calmly walked out to the helicopter as it was landing. Now, there's a reason all the witnesses talked about me walking to that chopper. The reason I walked was because I was ready to die. I am either going to be killed in this moment and my life will end, or I'm going to be free. Those were the only two options in my mind. Now, you'll notice I did not include a third option. I was not willing to use a gun. The gun was meant to make you back up from me. I was not going to make my situation worse by shooting it. They'd have killed me instantly then. So I walked out to the aircraft. Just as it was touching down, there's a submachine gun sitting on the bench. I moved the submachine gun onto the floor and took my seat. I then did what Uncle Sam taught me not to do. I did not fasten my seatbelt. That was an error. As the aircraft took off, we turned back toward the tree line to move back out. I came over the two, I didn't fall out, but I probably would have been better off if I had. As we lifted over the double fences, we flew over two trucks that had parked on the perimeter fence, and the two guards had gotten out of their trucks. Each one was holding a shotgun in one hand, a radio in the other, and they were looking up at me like, what the hell? And I looked down at them. I'm not the one to play with. So they left me alone. Again, good decision. Shotgun versus submachine gun, I like my odds. But I didn't want to have to go there. On the way out, I cannot tell you exactly what went wrong because I honestly don't know. My mind was, or my focus was on other things. But when we were about half a mile south of the facility, we started getting warning lights on the dashboard that something was wrong with the aircraft. Within a mile, we kissed the ground doing about 60 miles an hour. I don't remember the impact. I only know that because I didn't have my safety belt on, I was thrown through the windshield and sliced my, well, you can't really see the scars anymore, but I sliced my hand going through the windshield, landed on my back. What I do remember is looking up at nothing but a perfectly blue June sky and thinking I was dead. And I remember feeling so at peace with it. I felt good about being dead because my worries are over. While I was laying there, I heard noises behind me and realized that my partner was climbing out of the wreckage of the chopper. He had survived. So I got up, ran over, helped him out. Dumb me picked up another weapon, put it in my pocket, and we took off running. We ran for the next 30 hours. We were being chased by 440 ground officers, 440 ground vehicles. If I remember correctly, 3 SWAT teams, 2 K-9 units, and 3 choppers. And I still got away. Still got away. At about 11 p.m. that night, they had set up a perimeter, a wide perimeter around the area that we had crashed in. And I kind of liked this idea. It didn't work. But they had lined up their police vehicles, I don't know, every 200 feet perhaps, on the road and turned on the lights. So they had created an entire trip barrier is what they had done. We were laying in the grass underneath the palmetto right next to the road as 2 officers walked by with shotguns and flashlights, and they were actually looking under the bushes and walked right past us. How they missed us, don't know, but they did. As soon as the officers passed us, we rolled out from underneath the bushes and we did what you would not expect. We did not run. We merely held 2 branches like we were officers and just started walking down the road, walking patrol with them. And when they weren't looking, we simply eased right across the street like it meant nothing and busted their perimeter. We were good then. We had nobody on our tail. We were good. Or, well, so we thought. We walked the entire night until dawn started the next day. We stopped in an orange grove for a while to eat some oranges, which is why to this day I will never eat another orange. I ate 100 that morning, never again. What ended up happening was I violated another cardinal rule that Uncle Sam taught me. Never move during daylight. Never move during daylight. And we were so arrogant, so cocky, and we're so sure of ourselves that we continued walking through the forest in broad daylight. Accidentally walked up on I-95, and a trucker saw us and called it into the sheriff's office. We knew we'd been spotted, so we backtracked another way, thinking that we would throw off the police. If the police think we're headed that way when we're actually headed that way, we have a better chance of escape. The police aren't stupid. They're trained by Uncle Sam too. They learned from the same book I learned from. So as we were, I don't know, maybe 9 miles outside of the city of Stewart, we were crossing a river. We were halfway across this river when 2 helicopters popped over the tree line, one in front of us, one behind us, turned inward and started coming directly at us. Leaning outside the door of both choppers were snipers with automatic weapons. The gig is up. The gig is up. There is a way to bring down a helicopter. You shoot the pilot, you shoot the engine. Helicopter can't survive without either one of those things. But I was not willing to do that. I can't fault a sniper or a police helicopter pilot or any policeman on foot. I cannot fault them for doing their jobs. It wasn't personal. I put me in that situation. I made that dumb mistake. They're not responsible. One of the things that really got my attention, and I want the world to know that this happened, Lieutenant Ronald Cucchiera later captain, was the sniper in charge of the SWAT team that day. He was one of the men leaning outside the helicopter. He fired at me twice. He missed me by inches, intentionally. Turns out he's actually a medal winner on the rifle range. He meant to miss, but he got my attention. And he asked me to surrender. The first time, I refused. I asked him to shoot me, and he wouldn't. He asked me a second time, and I refused to surrender. Could have shot me. He didn't. I wanted at that point to save the life of my partner. We dropped our weapons. We swam back to the shore, and as one of the choppers circled overhead, another one landed and deposited Lieutenant Cucchiara. Lieutenant Cucchiara walked up on me with his weapon drawn. He had a handgun at that point. Asked me to go down to my knees. I refused. I asked him to shoot me, and he wouldn't do it. I asked him, what will it take for you to shoot me? If I rush you, will you shoot me? He said, no. I'll shoot you in the leg maybe, and that's going to hurt. I'm not going to kill you. It's not going to happen. I begged him to kill me. And he said to me, I have a wife and children waiting at home for me for dinner right now. Don't make me take this home. Lieutenant Cucchiara saved my life. I'm saying it publicly. That policeman saved my life when he had full authority to take it. And I'm publicly praising that man. I have no idea where he is today, and I hope he hears that I said this, and I hope he sees the video, because I thank him. It could have turned out so differently. Now, I told you a moment ago that my perspective was skewed. I wasn't seeing things clearly. And I told you that this story demonstrated it. Here's why. After my capture, the state of Florida took me to trial anyways. And I sat in front of a jury of my peers, and the state spent 10 days doing its best to make me look like a horrible human being. And a jury of my peers, just like each and every one of you in this room, found me not guilty. You folks found me not guilty. You did that. And I will tell you something else fascinating about that trial. When it was over, when they read the not guilty verdict, I was handcuffed and trussed up because I was an escape risk at that point. I had SWAT team at the doors of the courtroom. But I laid my head down on that table and started crying openly. One of the jurymen, I do not remember his name, but I remember he worked for American Airlines, walked up to me and he said, "We gave you your life back. We have faith in you. Now prove us right." Prove us right. Those are the things you don't see in the TV. Those are the things you don't see in the courtroom dramas. But they really do happen. If I had not escaped, I would have gone home. If I had had faith in the jury, I would have gone home. There was no need to escape. There was no need to put people's lives in danger. I did that. I did that. Now, I'm going to bet good money, if I had good money to bet, that every single person in this room has done something where you made a decision that had catastrophic consequences, whatever that was, only to find out later that you had it wrong. And I think that's the second part of what courage is all about. It's not enough to just act and say, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure that you have your facts clear. And you can't do that on your own. You've got to talk to other people about that. You've got to go to people that you trust to get another opinion. You've got to learn to see it from a different perspective. Because I think that's the second part of changing your life. I tell my employees, and they'll correct me right now if I'm wrong, if I'm saying something incorrect. If you're not happy with your job, change it. If you're not happy where you live, change it. And it doesn't have to be dramatic change. You know, changes are better off when they're small and in series. But if there's something about your life you're not happy with, change it. Nothing more simple than that. Next week, we're going to talk about something that is extremely dear to my heart, but I promise you ahead of time, it's going to be a difficult subject. I'm letting you know that coming next week will require courage, because it's not going to be an easy conversation for me. I don't think it'll be easy for you either. But I ask you, please, to think about the mistakes I've made, and don't make them in your life. If you have the ability to change it, do so. Thank you. I thank you so much for the second opportunity to talk to you. I am desperately looking forward to next week. Go with God.